Welcome to another Imagenomic video tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to show you how our Portraiture plugin functions inside of Lightroom. For those of you that are familiar with the Portraiture plugin over in Photoshop, you're going to find it's quite a bit different in the use in Lightroom. Lightroom per se doesn't have the same type of plugin paradigm that Photoshop has, and you have to go through a couple of different processes to get it to actually get the output that you're used to over in Photoshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the basic use of it, how it works, and we're going to give you some tips and hints on how to better optimize your workflow. There are two basic ways of using plugins inside of Lightroom. The first is the Edit In function. This is achieved by right-clicking on an image, go to Edit In, and then you'll see a list of the defined plugins that you have installed in your system. We're going to use Imagenomic Portraiture, left-click it, and then we come up with a dialog here, and the dialog is basically just a top to bottom, left to right running commentary of what you're going to do with the image. It's just saying you're going to edit photo with portraiture64.exe. It's telling you what to edit. In this case, because it's a raw file, we only have one option. It's going to be edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. If the image was a TIFF or a JPEG or PSD, you would have the option here of editing a copy or editing the original. Anytime you edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, whatever adjustments you've made in the develop module will be what you'll be editing here. If you just want to edit the copy itself and not use the Lightroom adjustments, you can use this one if you're working with a TIFF or a JPEG. And then if you want to actually edit the original, then you would have this one would be available to you. Now the copy file options, we have a couple of options here. We have TIFF and PSD. Our Portraiture plugin only supports TIFF, so you got to make sure that's checked. The color space, we support any of the standard color spaces, ProPhoto, Adobe, or sRGB. The bit depth, 16 or 8-bit, we support both. The resolution will be dependent on your print output. We have here just set 300. And then the compression, we recommend using none as opposed to zip. If the stack with original is checked, that means as soon as the image is processed, it'll be stacked back right beside the original image. We always recommend that you do that. Now for the plugin to work, all you do is click Edit. And you'll notice up here, Preparing File for Editing progress bar will pop up. After that happens, the Portraiture plugin window itself will pop up. And if you notice if you've used it in Photoshop, you'll notice basically exactly the same thing. The only difference is over here is you no longer have the ability to save it out as a new layer or create a transparency mask because Lightroom doesn't support those features. Also, if you're editing more than one image, right above this mask preview here, you'll see a little cue that'll pop up and telling you how many images you're working on and give the ability to go between them inside and make separate changes to them. So as you can see, this is pretty much standard here as far as our plugin works. We've got a tutorial up on the web that shows how it works with Photoshop, and the sliders and the controls, the previews, the whole 9 yards are exactly the same thing. So we recommend that you go through that tutorial to see how it works. So we click on OK. Immediately we have a processing 1 of 1, which if you had more than one, it would show up there, and it tells you how much time's left. And as soon as it gets through processing, it's going to stack that image with the original image. Here's the change. It just updated the thumbnail preview there. And this is one of the caveats that you have to watch out for in Lightroom. If you have a lot of images you're working on them, the updates of the thumbnails aren't going to be immediate. And it's going to take a while for you to be able to see the actual results there. So some people get kind of scared when they don't see that thumbnail update, but that's just all part of the Lightroom process there. In the first run through of the Portraiture and the Edit In function, we only use one image. We're going to select 3 images this time. First image here, and then we're going to shift click and select 3 images. Then we're going to right click on this image, Edit In, Imagenomic Portraiture. Again, the same dialog comes up here. We're going to output the same functions, TIFF, ProPhoto, 16-bit, 300, and none, stack with original. We click Edit. Now as Portraiture comes up, you'll notice the difference over here we have, as I mentioned earlier. We've got a queue list over here that shows that we have 3 images that we can process, and it's showing this is image 1 of 3. We can use these arrows here to go between one image and another. It'll apply the settings there that are based on it when it comes in. Now we're in the third one. You can also click this arrow here and it'll pop down a list box here, and it shows the actual image names there, and you can look at them as names or you can also view them as thumbnails. And this works the same way as it does in our Photoshop plugin. You can resize the thumbnails out. Click on the thumbnail, and then it will go to that image, and then it will give you the parameters up here on the preview. Now, there's two things that have to be discussed here about how you can process images inside of here, because you have them all loaded inside. If you've got more than one image selected in a batch process, and the way it works is up here in the About Preferences, we have a switch in the batch settings, and that switch is Use Parameters from Last Session as Default. And what that means is if this is checked, and you come into Portraiture, whatever the last settings that you had on your last session that you actually completed out will automatically apply to all of those images. So most people, what they do is they just use parameters from last session as default. That way they come in and they can just click OK, and then it will process the images with the same settings that they use, because most people use the same settings on most all their shoots over and over again. But if you uncheck this, you can have the option of going through the images one at a time, making your own custom settings, and it will keep those custom settings for you. And then you can tweak each individual image. And the way you do that is just say, we go back to the beginning here, image 1 of 3, and we just set the preset back to default. And say we go to image 2, and we want to just say a high key. And then we go to image 3. We go up here to our presets and just say we want a smoothing high. And as we scroll back through the images there, you see image 2 has the different settings here for the high key. And then image 1 itself has the default settings up here. Now, if we click on here, on OK right now, it will process these images. So that's what we're going to do, OK, and then the dialog pops up, processing 1 of 3. Tell you the elapsed time and the estimated time. This is normal. And as we see down here at the bottom, we've got the original, we've got the edited image, we have the original, edited image, original, edited image. The edited image is stacked with the original. Processing multi-images with the export functionality in Lightroom and Portraiture Plugin work the same way. Again, we're going to select these 3 images. Shift click, right click on the image, go to export, left click export. Our export dialog pops up. We want to make sure that it doesn't say files on disk. It has to say Imagenomic Portraiture up here, so you can get the export action to show up in here in the dialog box. We're going to use the preset Enhanced Glamour. We're going to use the same paradigm here. We're going to put it in the subfolder, Portraiture Export. We're going to add it to the catalog. Tell it to sharpen for the screen, and we're going to use the amount being standard. Now the metadata, this is something we're not going to get into a big deal here about metadata. There's a lot of tutorials and things up there that function on metadata. And so we're going to let you utilize the metadata settings the way that you normally use it. Most people, they add a copyright watermark on top of there. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to click Export. And when we do that, you're going to start off, it's going to start by preparing the images just like it did before. And because it's processing JPEGs, it's going to do it pretty quick. Then Portraiture loads, and then we have the JPEG images pop up inside of there. And because these are smaller images, the effects from the previous run are going to be a lot more pronounced on here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to come back here and set it back to generic default. We click OK. It's going to process those images. It placed them in this Portraiture Export, which is underneath the folder of the original images. If we click on here, we'll see now we have these images out here in that Portraiture Export. Most people like that functionality because it gives them the ability to track their files, see what they're putting where. You can put your web output in one, you can put your print output in another, and then if you have any really large or customized stuff, you could even put it in another. So it's a very easy way of keeping track of your images inside of Lightroom. So in a nutshell, there are 2 ways of processing our images through Lightroom. The first one is right-click, Edit In, Imagenomic Portraiture, which brings up the Edit In dialog. And the other is the right-click, Export, Export, which brings up the Export dialog. And you always have to remember that it shows the Imagenomic Portraiture up here. Now over here we have a preset on the left-hand side, And basically that preset, it just centers out everything here and gives you output to TIFF format, Pro Photo, compression none, 16-bit. As you can see, the previous one that we had in there was going out to JPEG settings in there. So that's what this preset is over here. You can create your own presets, whatever the settings are over here. And here, just say if you made it as a JPEG output out here like this, you could come in here and you could add your own presets. You could call it whatever you wanted to there. So overall, we've developed the Portraiture plugin to give you the same functionality that it has over in Photoshop within the limits of Lightroom itself. And you do have to remember that Lightroom has to prepare the image, because it's actually taking the file, especially if you're working with a copy of the image. It has to prepare the image, create a copy of that image, then it has to load it up inside of Portraiture, and then Portraiture has to process that. So it's a little bit longer process than what you may be used to over in Photoshop, but the results are exactly the same way.